Conversations with Stef. We are here to give you everyday conversation about money and life. I'm a special guest or co-host this morning. Stef and Drew are my son and a good friend respectively, and I will let them introduce themselves to you so you know who they are.
My name is Andrew Stewart. I'm a financial advisor here in the Durham region, focusing on families of Caribbean and African descent. I'm a family man, 2 girls, and I'm really looking to make a difference in how prepare our Caribbean people in estate planning and making sure that they have their legacies in place.
My name is Stef McMillan. I'm an award-winning mortgage agent located in the GTA area, specifically Mississauga, where I grew up, was grown up and raised there. I have a fiance, and a family that you can see was on the call, and they tend to join on the call as well. Simply my message here today, well, every conversation is simply just to share stories and antidotes of how to, build your wealth for yourself and your future as well. So thank you for everyone for joining today.
Thanks a lot, Stefan and Andrew. My name is Raymond McMillan. I have got a very interesting and lengthy background. I'm a migrant to Canada as a young individual, and then I transitioned into the US. But apart from that, I started out in the investment planning and banking industry back in 1994 as an investment advisor, and then a high net worth bank, one of the major banks in Toronto. And then I transitioned into mortgage brokering full time in 1999, built a successful mortgage brokerage, which I transferred to my son, who is Stefan. I know you haven't realized that, in 2018. And then I've shifted the focus now to coaching real estate investors, aspiring mortgage brokers, and building a real estate investment portfolio, both in Canada, the US, and in Guyana. For those who are unfamiliar, Guyana is in South America. It's the only English-speaking country with a Caribbean heritage. So that's it about us. What are we talking about today? We're talking about the wealth blueprint, and this is the second part of the conversation we're having. And we want these conversations to be quite engaging and interactive. So for those in the audience, please feel free to jump in. You can put your comments or questions in the chat. If you want to come on camera, that's fine with us. You can just basically raise your hand and then turn your mic off and just ask your question. We will love the participation. So today we're going to speak a bit about the last two components of the wealth building process.
Can we just do a quick recap of the other ones first, right?
Yeah, Andrew, can you do that for us? I was trying to get my notes here and I was lost. So if you can tell the audience
have it up, I was looking for it as well.
Yeah. So we spoke about budgeting last week. We spoke about income and employment, and we spoke about asset and income protection. Sorry, this came off the top of my head. So yes, so we chose a 5-step approach to the wealth blueprint, or building wealth for families and our future. The first thing was creating a family budget, where you're not just spending money as you earn it or as it comes in, whether you win it, inherit it, or you work for it. And then the next step was the asset protection, income and asset protection. So you know how to protect your income and your assets. And then what was the next one? Sorry, the third one?
You have that one, Stefan?
I'll have to pull it up.
Yeah. Then the last two are business building and estate planning. There's a lot of talk about people starting their own businesses and that sort of stuff. And the expectation is that for every Black person to rise above their circumstances, they should start a business. But that's all well and good. But not everybody has all the attributes to start in the business. Not everybody has any interest in starting a business. There's some people just want to go to work and earn their income. and go back home to their family and friends and have a good time in their life. And that's perfectly acceptable. However, what I would recommend is that if you've got a very close friend or a relative who has a business and you have certain skills and qualities that might assist that person, even finances, to help them build their business even bigger and better, and you're interested in participating, that might be um, your foray in entrepreneurship. While you're not an active business owner or an active business builder, but you're involved passively. And for many of us, one of the best ways to invest, the safest ways to invest probably, is probably passive investment. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I was just thinking about that this morning as I was getting ready for our conversation. Like, how do we make business building an important part of the conversation for young people, young families, migrants, and then Afro-Americans, Afro-Canadians, and people of Caribbean heritage? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that you bring up some very interesting parts to that. And for me, whenever I have a conversation with another business owner, my first question to them was always, what was your purpose? How did you decide, and how did you even begin to even want to start a business? A lot of the times, the purpose, sometimes you fall into it. Could be a family business, could be you had no other choice because you got let go. Like, there's so many circumstances why people will enter into entrepreneurship or starting a business. But I think if we're really looking at a wealth building tool and what a business is, we have to, I think each person should clearly define, am I just looking to trade something for hours and dollars, meaning that I want to be a solopreneur, I want to take my my skill set and provide it to the public and hopefully make more money than I can do in the employment space? Or do I want to create a legit business, meaning that I have proper structure, I have employees, I'm looking to grow this thing, I'm looking to exit on the end of selling it? So clearly defining the purpose of why we're going into the business to begin with, I think for me is where I usually want to define. Is it going to be a wealth building thing, or is it just something to put food on the table?
Yeah, I agree with that a whole lot. I mean, Steph, what has been your experience? I mean, did you fall into the business world, or is this part of your master plan?
No, that's a great question. And I was actually talking yesterday with my fiance about that. And it's kind of a bit of both, because during high school, most of my courses was business related. So I always was business minded. I was always interested in being an entrepreneur before it became what it is today. So I took courses related to my interests. So international business, entrepreneurship. So for me, I always was cultivating a path to one day starting a business. And then, you know, just for, not to have a long story, but for a shorter version, I kind of was in the right place at the right time when I walked into the office I am in today, with my dad. And that's where I started to really transfer the skills that I learned into the mortgage space. And also, you have to look at, when you start a business, or even if you're an employee at somewhere else, a lot of those skills are transferable to the practice or the business that you want to start. And the points what Andrew made was very valid, and I think sometimes overlook is a sense that you also have to look at it as a realistic trajectory where you're trying to build a profitable business. And sometimes you are going to have, losses in between. Is how you kind of pinpoint and see where the next step is and how to overcome those challenges. Because with running a business comes with challenges. I'm talking at a small level or a large level. There's always challenges, and you have to not be emotional approaching those challenges, because it can sway your decision making. Because you want to be quick or not even quick, but very agile to the decision making when you run a business, because it can be at times detrimental if you make a very emotional decision on the spot. So just in a nutshell, for me, I always wanted to be operating some type of business. It was not necessarily the mortgage business, but for me, it was something that was easily transferable to what I learned in my education. Even with my friends, when we started a clothing line, all of that experiences was poured into what I am today.
Well, why would someone give up a guaranteed income and a guaranteed pension to want to venture out into trying to write their own paycheck every single day? Because regardless of the size of your business, that's basically what you're doing. And as your business grows and you start to have employees and people depend on you to take care of your families, not only are you writing your own paycheck, you're writing your own paycheck for 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 employees. And there's many variables outside of your control, which can have a positive or negative impact on the survivability of your business. I mean, the overall economy, we've had health issue, the health crisis a couple of years ago. We've got economic decisions by the federal governments and different levels of government. What would make you get up in the morning and say, you know what, I think I want to do this every day for the next 40 years of my life? Like what's your motivation to do that?
I think if most people actually were honest with, if they looked ahead 5, 10 years and knew that the skill sets that they would need to acquire, learn, obtain, or surround themselves with people of those skill sets to navigate those pitfalls that you just identified, most people would most likely shy away from starting the business. So I think it's a special person and a special individual who, like you said, would wake up and consciously make that decision to, you know what, I'm going to leave my job. Whether you're doing very well at your job or you're at the low totem pole and you want to improve your life some way. I think it takes a very, very special person to say that, you know what, I can venture out on my own and possibly do it better. But I wanted to do it quickly just to pull to our participants. And if you know how to raise your hand using the chat or using the emotions, just who here is running their own business or is self-employed, just by a show of hands.
One
Or
of
you
our
can even just come
one
off
of
of
our
mute.
Yeah, Paul said his reasons for his children. That's why he would start his own business. And that's a good answer, but I'd like him to expand more on that. Is he doing it for his children in order to spend time with them,
Or is
or
it
is he
money?
doing it, or is it a money thing? You want to now
Is it a
create
money?
this future wealth for your children. For me, it was a combination of things. And Stefan can tell you, I never missed any stuff at my kids' school since they were in elementary school, because my business schedule was built around my children's concert and school schedule. That wasn't why I started working for myself. That's a whole lot of conversation. We can share that further on as we go ahead. But I decided if I'm going to work for myself, I'm not getting involved in 21st century slavery. I want free time. And I'm always appalled when I hear people talk about, man, I'm grinding 20 hours a day. Now, that to me is not what my purpose here is in life. Yeah, I agree. It's something you have to put a little extra time in, but grinding 20 hours a day is not the key to building a successful business. So let's see what Paul has to say. He's saying for him, it's creating generational wealth and it allows you to be flexible with your schedule. And that's what I said myself. I mean, that's what it was for me. I know Andrew, the same thing for you, perhaps. You've got
Well,
your two daughters.
it has turned into that because I have a family now. But my first motivation was I kept on getting caught up in either downsizing or not getting along with the
Okay.
managers. Mine was my purpose was very negative of why I had to get away from the desk.
So hold on. Were you a good employee or a bad employee?
I'm gonna say I was motivated if the manager motivated me. Let's just put it that put it that
You have
way.
to be micromanaged.
No, I never liked micromanaging, and that was another reason why I wanted to venture out, because I hated micromanaging, and I hated whoever got promoted was a manager and they never had managerial capabilities. So, and then downsizing in general. So for overall, my experience of why I ventured out to wanting to be my own thing was on a negative aspect, and I wanted to now control my own destiny.
I think we have another response on the chat from Ricky.
Yeah, Ricky is saying he has done some partial entrepreneurship, but he's always been dissuaded through tough economic times or tough times. And that's something that I have a bit of an issue with. And this is not a knock at you, Ricky. I mean, stepping out to do your own stuff is great. I think it's very challenging to build a successful business on the part-time level. It becomes additional income. You may make, depending on what you're doing, you may make 10, 15, 20,000 dollars a year. But will you actually make it into high six figures, generate $1 million worth of revenue, which is usually the goal for a business?
Well, let me challenge you on that for a second, Ray, because you hear a lot of the times on the social medias make $10,000 a month passively. Now, right? Now, if you could say I'm making $10,000 a month passively, would you identify that as a successful business?
But yes, but define passive. Like, what are you doing? I mean, back in my time when I was young and on date myself, the thing to make passive income, or quote unquote passive income, was envelope stuffing. I'm sure you remember those days. Maybe you'd stuff envelopes with flyers and marks and stuff. They deliver to your home, and then they pay you for every envelope you stuffed and licked and put a stamp on and then mailed.
That is not passive.
Okay, there you go. So it was actually defined as earn money doing nothing or something like that.
It's different now.
What if passive income? So I am not a child of the tech age. How do you define passive income?
So to me, a passive income would be if I take the time to create a digital asset once, but that asset recurs income for me off of that one initial onset of work done, where I'm no longer having to, I may have to slightly maintain it or make an adjustment, but the initial onset of work is done upfront or whatever cost it is. And then that asset produces income for me, no different than a rental income from a house, right? You do all the legwork from the front, you buy the house, you have the capital, but from there on, you're hoping that rental property is providing you a supplemental income where don't have to work as hard.
But hold on for 1 second. Rental properties don't give you passive income. They give you income.
They give you
income. Imagine rental properties a lot of hard work. And I'm speaking as a landlord.
Yes.
But is
it as much work as that you had to do to get the property?
That's the easiest part of the whole process. And buying the property is actually the easiest part of building a rental portfolio. All you need is some reasonable income, a decent property, and not too bad credit score. And most people have that. Okay? The part now that you have to actually work on is managing your tenant relationship, managing your real estate, dealing with all the issues that will come up with that property. And depends on where you are. Are you in a flood zone and in a hurricane zone? Are you, what kind of tenants are you having? Are you having tenants who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale? Are you dealing with high-end tenants? Are you dealing with a short-term rental? Are you dealing with a long-term rental? So the type of property you got, there's nothing passive about owning investment real estate. So I'm always, and I mean, Stef can probably attest this. When he sat around me since he was in my office, he was probably 8 years old. So I am still I understand the online stuff and the technical stuff, but even that is not necessarily passive because.
Well, nothing is truly passive.
Passive, yeah. But I mean, what it is, you're not laboring for this money, and you can probably make significantly more than the average. But how many people have the ability to build a tech company or a tech application that will give them $10,000 a day or a month or whatever the numbers you quoted, and do it successfully? How many people have that ability?
Okay, let's stick on. I want to kind of stay on the conversation of passive income for a little bit. I was having this conversation with my brother. He's a graphic designer. And to me, this is the same definition of passive income, where you're not laboring or refining the work. It's just something you built and it drips money monthly, weekly, however you seem fit. So he gets a monthly drip of income from YouTube. So he created this like online graphic designer tutorial, and he gets money from that. And to me, when it's passive income, when you don't even realize it hits your account. So for me, passive income is almost in a way that something you don't even see coming in, because it's the system's there, right? Unlike what we're talking about, investment properties is a physical asset, right? So most times, in most cases, when it comes to passive income in this generation, I only can speak of this generation because I'm just born in '92, is that people, most people have a digital.
What do you say? We old folks don't understand passive income?
No, I was just telling the audience this if they were just wondering who I'm coming across this example right now. So if someone had like a digital infrastructure, like my brother, I could use for an example, that's a way of creating a passive income where you just have this digital footprint. In most cases, it's digital nowadays. Or you have, like some people do catering from their home. I've seen that on Facebook. Like that's another kind of passive.
No, that ain't passive, man. That's like slavery. You baking stuff out your house and that passive
That's
income, man. That ain't nothing
excessive,
passive
right?
about that.
That's excessive
Yeah,
Listen,
because
yeah,
you
you
consider
bake
it slavery
anything?
because
yeah.
here's the
But
thing.
that's okay. Okay, yeah, that's a good point because everyone, it's subjective, bottom line. So we have clients that do catering and they find joy out of it. So if you find joy out of it, you may not see it as slavery. To
Okay.
us, it may sound like daunting,
We
hard
need to
work.
define passive income. Passive income, in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure Webster talked about it, if you can lie in your bed the rest of your life, never get up and can take care of yourself financially, that is passive income. I can just sit on the beach, drink a cold beer, watch the sun rise and set 7 days a week for the rest of my life, and do nothing. That, to me, is true passive income. If you got to exert any kind of effort, whether it's creating a marketing plan for your product, whether it's constantly getting yourself in front of a new audience, whether it's going down and seeing, make sure your tenant hasn't knocked out the whole front door of your apartment building, that's not passive income. Because you got to get into your car, get up, have a shower, get dressed, get into your car, get on the bus, and go and do something, or get out of your bed and go to your computer and do something for X number of hours
I
per
want
day.
you to be careful of defining it as what you do with your time attached to the income provided by the asset. By you attaching what you are doing outside of what that asset is doing has nothing to do with passive income. Right? Like
Okay.
you may say that you're going to get up and go to the beach and all that stuff, but that asset still needs to be maintained some way, somehow. You still need to do some adjustments. You may be making money while you're at the beach, but those two are distinctly different things to defining passive income. So I think what me and Stefan are saying is that the passive income is dependent upon how much labor is put out, as opposed to how much income is being coming in or dripped down for your lifetime. Right.
Yeah,
So
like I understand the drip with the YouTube stuff that Darren is doing. Like I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. He's figured out, and I mean, Darren has been a tech guy since he was like 9 years old. I mean, he was creating bootleg CDs, like during was it LimeWire days?
Yeah,
I don't know if you know what LimeWire, the music streaming software, when you had to get a license agreement. I mean, he was making bootleg digital DVD CDs like since he was like in elementary school, right? So he figured out, and I think, and that's the other thing also, is the entrepreneurship stuff, is it DNA? Is it focus? Is it you just a little, you don't want to work hard for all your life? Like, what is it that drives the person go out and try to build a business. For me, it was a couple of things. One, I had come to a country that didn't really acknowledge my educational qualification. I was always underemployed. And if I stayed where I was, and I got friends in the call here who grew up with me, they have done extremely well, not migrating from the country that we came from, which is Guyana, right? So I got to North America, I was underemployed for about 4 or 5 years of my life. And then I lived in a neighborhood where I saw white affluence. So I didn't live in a predominantly immigrant environment, which is what happens to many migrants to North America. We tend to stay around our comfort zone. So I moved away from that environment 6 months after being in Canada, and I saw folks living differently. Not excessively, but differently. What I saw with the regular immigrant who would come from Africa, the Caribbean, and Eastern Europe. And I decided that, okay, I want to be able to figure out how to live like them and do what they do. I'm not finding a job that's going to pay me. At the time, I got 6-figure income was reasonable back in the night. I wasn't finding a job that would do that for me. So I tried to figure it out myself. And the first time I failed miserably. You know, I mean, I lost a lot, and, you know, but I was younger. Right? So my motivation was trying to figure out how to make myself and my family's life comfortable without working 2 jobs or working overtime, and that's because I never saw value in working overtime. I think on the last call, I saw with part-time jobs. I'm not a proponent of part-time job because there's a whole lot of tax implication to that, right? But then as I started to do stuff on my own, I got into the investment business and consulting business. It became fun because I met all these people, potential clients and eventual clients, who had different stories. So I started to learn so much from these individuals. So it's like doing a whole master's program in business now from the people I'm meeting. You know, plus it came the freedom. So I'm meeting interesting people, and I have the freedom to do my own schedule. And then the money started to come. Right? So for me, it was accidental. You know, the job I left, like the last job I left, was a high-paying bank job with an amazing pension package, stock purchase plan. And people thought I was crazy when I left. I mean, I had an annoying VP who used to knock my door every Monday, ask me what my targets were. And that's the other thing. I was meeting financial targets for a company that if I had done the exact same thing independently, I'd have tripled my income doing nothing more.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my motivation, you know. But I think for many people, not everybody has that ability. And that's what I mentioned earlier. The business building has to be, how do you help John take his auto body shop from 1 lift to 2 lifts and become a 5% owner? Because you are an accountant for a major accounting firm. You don't have the time. Like he asked a question earlier, right? He hasn't really been very, very successful with his passive income ventures. But if Ricky has a very good friend who owns a body shop that is just him alone, but Ricky has HR experience, how do you help your friend take his body shop to 8 employees and now be a major competitor in the automotive industry within your local neighborhood? I think that is how we have to start looking at business building, as opposed to just everybody start their own business because they didn't like their boss or they didn't like being micromanaged. Because when you leave employment and go into self-employment, the boss you have is very, very demanding, which is your customer. And they're never wrong. And you can't quit now because you've invested time and probably a lot of money. So you're going from one boss to another boss, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think about it.
I
Go ahead,
don't
Stef.
view, yeah, my viewpoint's a little different. I don't view them as a boss because I have a service and they're still the client. When I start in my self-employed journey, the man in the mirror was myself. So for me, I was a little critical of me. And sometimes it was justifiable and sometimes it wasn't. And it could mirandor your elevation, your growth, because you're also growing. So if you're kind of stepping into something that now you're another industry to another industry, you're kind of starting almost fresh. So it's very grassroots. So for me, um, it was something that I had to kind of shed off and not be so critical of myself, because you have to be mindful that the client can see that too. So sometimes they can pick up when you're being too hard on yourself. And that's what I was going back to earlier. Business and emotions don't mix. I'm not saying you should be robotical. You should be authentic. However, you shouldn't share or pour out too much to the client. And this is where it kind of gets a slippery slope for me with it. You want to connect with the client, but you don't want to, be like the buddy or a friend. Because I have core friends. So I still maintain that relationship. They know stuff about me that I share, and we do connect and we do have certain laughs and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's very much not transactional, but it's still advisor-client relationship. And just circling back to that comment, I don't see them as bosses, and I think that can be a bit that's when you're kind of working too much for the client and you can overachieve sometimes. Because when it comes to bosses at a corporate setting, we're trying to please the boss. We're trying to hit the metrics. We're trying to get all these promotions. So I would be careful. I wouldn't say I look at them as a boss, because that's why I stepped out of that whole corporate arena. I didn't want it to be, you know, reaching out to anybody, coming like, oh, this is my numbers. Oh, that's great, but we need to hit this number next quarter. So for me, I look at them simply as, the client, and that's it. And I keep it that way and maintain that relationship with them.
Yeah, I think, and just to touch on that real quickly, it all depends on industry specific and what method works for that entrepreneur or business owner to make that particular business successful. Some businesses require a certain level of servitude to the client, and some businesses require just a more transactional type of framework. But in the interest of time, I just want to jump on to the last part of our wealth building blueprint, which is the estate planning or estate preservation side of things. So just to go real quickly to you two, um, from going from employee to now either self-employed or business owner and collecting assets and obtaining, me and Stefan are still in the life cycle of, obtaining assets while still trying to earn income. But in the mindset of passing that on to the next generation or making sure that you have enough in your retirement years, how important is it for you to have a plan in place of an estate? And do you have a clear understanding of the value of your estate and what you want that estate to be going on to the next generation?
That's a good question. I'd love to hear the audience's comments on that. Because I think for most people, estate planning is a will and a power of attorney. And that's for most people. You ask them, do you have an estate plan? I say, yeah, I have a will and I got a power of attorney. Where's the will? Oh, it's somewhere at home. When last have you reviewed it? Oh, well, nothing really
Yeah.
nothing much has changed. And you hear it a lot, nothing much has changed. Well, every day something changes, you know. Um, you know, one of the common ones is you've got people who have lost parents who've lost adult children, They've got new additions to the family. They've got marital relationship changes. You've got a an adult child who's not common law with someone, but it's a with a woman or a man. That relationship changes. They no longer live together. And each state, country, province has different laws on how they treat relationships. So I think it's very important to understand that. I mean, Andrew, you speak better to this than I do. I'm not I don't work in that space. Um, the magnitude of estate planning and the importance of estate planning, um, particularly from a point of view of asset protection and making sure that the assets are transferred to who they need to be transferred to in their original form. None of the assets is lost in the transfer. And by assets, it can be property, jewelry, artwork, um, real estate, cash in an account, investment accounts, that sort of stuff. So let us talk a little more about that process and what exactly is you would recommend it as a chartered life underwriter in how to transfer the asset. I know we got people in the call from all parts of the world, some are in the Caribbean, some are in the US, some are in Canada. But the basic concept of transferring money from generation doesn't change much wherever in the world you are. I mean, insurance is the one thing that's been around. The companies that operate in the US and Canada operate throughout the Caribbean in most cases. So it's not significantly different, from one jurisdiction to the next.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a key point of where to start. In my experience, is first understanding the life or the family makeup of where that individual is. Common law, I'm living common law right now, but I'm also a blended family from a previous relationship, whether you're married or an individual. Starting from that standpoint is going to make your decision making along what happens with your estate and how the government and what the rules are around your estate is going to transpire. So whether people know it or not, everybody has a will. Whether you have a will of your own, but if you die, you're still going to have a will because the government's going to make it for you. So there's already rules and processes in place and amounts that go to beneficiaries, whether you have a will written or not. Your will is your one time or multiple times to make that decision for yourself when you're gone, right? So having a will is a good place to start, but I think more importantly before that is to understand where you are as a family makeup, what kind of assets you currently have and are looking to obtain, and then really figuring out where do you want those assets to go and then once you know where you want them to go is to find what is the best way to transfer those assets. So people will come to me a lot of the times and say, okay, well, I have 3 kids and my oldest kid will make the decisions because they're just the oldest, and they take that old mindset of the oldest gets everything and just leaves them to make all the decisions. They're the executor, they get all the assets, not really understanding what ramifications that causes in a family where one person gets a majority or most and people feel left out, and that causes for estates and probates and things to be caught up in the legal system where people are fighting over assets. Now,
let me ask you a question there. Not interrupt you.
yeah.
For the purpose of the conversation, let's define assets because everybody, we got a different idea what an asset is. So in your experience working with your clients, what do you think are the top 5 or top 10 assets that people will usually have that are important enough to want to transfer to the next generation?
So it's going to be their primary residence, which at this particular point is has a tax benefit of not being taxed when you transfer to your next generation.
And that's in Canada.
That's
might not
in
be
Canada.
the same in other jurisdictions.
Right. So you do have the capital gains exemption on a principal residence, but then people have their investments. So whether that be into stocks, mutual funds, or an RSP, a lot of people invest heavily into an RSP, not knowingly that that's 100% taxable upon their passing. And then they have their TFSAs, and then they may have rental properties. So out of the top 5, which most families, regular or medium income families have, is going to be 2 registered type investment products, RSPs, TFSAs, their principal residence, and then a rental property. And then they have
So for US listeners, the RSP is a resident retirement savings plan, which is very similar to an IRA, an investment retirement account in the United States. So the tax treatment is very similar. The TFSA is what is called a tax-free savings account. So it's a regular bank account or an investment account that the money generates there tax-free. And there are limits on how much you can put in every year and that sort of stuff. Just for clarification for folks who are listening to us in the US or somewhere else, or have US investment accounts. Sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah. So when we're looking at those particular assets and itemizing them, from when you have a good list of what they are, then you want to look at, okay, what's their value? What's their fair market value? And then look at what that cost base or the ACB is on that particular asset. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out what is the gain on that asset, if any. And if there is going to be a capital gain, then how is that going to be taxed to your estate? Now, I'm not sure if in a U.S. Participants have what they call probate planning, but you'll find that a lot of people try to avoid assets flowing through their estate by doing probate planning. And I'll simply put, probate planning is making sure that that asset flows directly to that individual, i.e. naming a beneficiary of that asset and not through your estate, which could be beneficial, but most times it's not.
Let me ask you this, Andrew. I know in the beginning of our conversations, you were talking about infinite banking. How does that can that be transferred into estate planning? How does that work? How does that tie into estate planning, or does it?
Absolutely, it can, because when you start looking at how to deal with any tax liability that comes out of your estate, insurance is the most cost-effective way to pay for those taxes, unless your estate is liquid enough to pay for that tax liability. Because most people don't understand that before any asset can get transferred to a beneficiary, the taxes have to be paid. The taxman wants his pound of flesh first.
So what do? Do they freeze the asset, or do they send you a tax bill?
So when your personal representative or your executor will have to file a terminal return, right?
Okay.
And they have to basically, it's a huge undertaking to be an executor, because now you have to not only know what the assets are and figure out what is the best way to deal with that asset and who it's going to, if there is a will, but simply put, you have to pay those taxes before you can either relinquish that asset to that beneficiary. So insurance, if you're in the case of an IBC type of policy, an IBC policy,
What's an IBC? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Infinite banking type of policy, it's an insurance strategy that is meant to grow with you for your time, to make sure that the insurance and the cash value is in there to pay for that tax liability. So absolutely, it can be pushed, but again, an infinite banking policy has purposes. And so not every type of policy is going to be designed to handle that tax liability efficiently. So it always boils down to, again, where are you looking at in regards to your financial plan landscape? And is this insurance specifically meant to deal with that tax liability, or is it meant for something else?
But let me ask you a question. So three of us are at different life cycle stages. I'm in my 60s. I'm not going to be your age. Stefan is like probably 30 years old, 32 years old. We're all different stages. So Stefan's my eldest son. He's 32 years old. My youngest child, which is Stefan's younger sister, is 27. So I have 3 adult children. Darren, who you mentioned earlier, is 30 years old. Stefan has no children. You've got 2 young daughters. They're 12 and 4, somewhere around that age. Am I correct?
Yep.
Right? So as an individual, as a family, as a couple, when should one start the estate planning process? And how often should we, if we know we're going to build this pool, we're going to start buying, you're going to invest in mutual funds, stock portfolio, real estate, you're going to have properties in the Caribbean, that you've got an agenda in life to create assets, real assets. Because I also said, the only folks who have tax problems let me rephrase it. Let me put it in its raw context. Poor people ain't got tax problems, right? If you got a tax problem, means you have some money. It might not be liquid cash, but it's an asset that has value in the eyes of the IRS, the CRA, or whatever tax body is governing the country you live in. So when is it important for us to start really understanding the estate planning process and how we need to navigate it to make sure that our children and our grandchildren get what we want to leave for them? And should we look at putting assets into our children's name? Like, how do we're not looking at tax evasion, we're looking at tax avoidance in terms of the asset going where we want it to go in its as wholesome an amount as is physically possible while being legal.
In my opinion, they say the best time to start something is yesterday, but the next time is now. And I think when it comes down to estate planning and understanding what goes into it, I think the more you understand now, we'll have a very, very grave, not grave is the wrong word, but really we'll have a big, just missing my words here for a second, but it will actually help you decide on how you're going to obtain that asset. So for an example, you brought up, should I buy a house with my child? Right? And should I put my child's name on my property so that it can go to my child to avoid probate, which some families entertain without understanding the ramifications of that. So on an asset like your home or a rental property, putting somebody on title just to make sure that it goes to that individual has tax consequences immediately for you, because then you're pretty much selling half of that property right now, and then you have to incur that tax liability today instead of waiting until you pass away. So to answer your question,
let me ask you a question. Does it matter when you do it? If I did it 25 years ago, or does it still have the same effect as if I do it today and I pass away 3 months later?
Doing it 25 years ago, it's the same effect. It's just, do you have the money now to pay for that taxes that you have to pay, right? So if
regardless of whenever it's done,
regardless of when it's done, right? So if your goal is to say, you know what, I want this particular child to have this asset because I know they're going to take care of it. They want it. They've expressed interest that they wanted it. But in doing so, you're also opening up that asset to the creditors of that child. Because if that child now goes into debt, or let's just say they get married and they divorce, that asset is now exposed to that divorce and those properties being separated. So
or they get sued.
Or they get sued. So in doing so, it's the same thing as going in business with somebody who has bad credit, right? You're exposing yourself or that asset to whatever that individual may do in the future, right? So your intentions were good, but now that creates issues down the line that you never really thought could happen or intended to be an issue.
So the estate planning then should start at your first paycheck.
I think once you start acquiring assets, I think once you say, you know what, I'm going to invest my money into a product or some type of registered program, whether it be the RSP or TFSA, or like you said, or you start buying a home or rental property, understanding how.
Or you own a business.
Or you own a business.
Understanding whether it's making money or not.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Understanding how that's registered and what type of ownership is on that particular asset goes a long way in understanding how that's going to be passed down to the next generation.
Let me ask you a question then. I mean, I know we just about 5 minutes past 11 o'clock, but we usually tell people it's from 10:15 to 11 o'clock. But I mean, this is a great conversation. So we can go a bit over. As advisors who work in the mortgage space and the insurance and investment space, how many of your people you deal with have any kind of estate plan in place? And do they understand what will happen to their assets, even if it's just a for residence when they pass away?
Mhm.
And what is the conversation like with them when you started talking about estate plan? I know that's a mouthful, but I mean, like what is happening out there today in terms of individual? I know we deal with a lot of Caribbean and Black clients. Like, what is the mindset of people particularly in Canada?
Yeah, my experience with that, with estate planning, with in particular Caribbean or African clients, it's more of a reactionary. So when it occurs, so when the asset's in jeopardy, that's when people react to it. It's never a conversation where they come to me and like, hey, what is estate planning? How do we get started? Who do I need to speak to? It's always to the point where it's to the bridge of when it's happening, when it's occurring. And I think we did touch on this in the last one of our conversations. I can't recall what episode, but I did say in that episode, my duty is to educate more on that topic, um, and shine some light towards that and how to get started on that. Speak to a lawyer regarding that, a reputable one, which we do have. We have in our corner, and an accountant, or myself, or Andrew. Um, and I find that um, it gets very scattery in that point when you're reactionary. So you don't know, and then it's a lot of layers. So if you have like a mixed family, you have children here and there, and it gets a little overly complicated to be reacting to that point where you could have started what Andrew said, when you acquire that asset. And these assets they had for over 20 years. So it's more starting when, like Andrew, I'm going back to what Andrew said, starting when you acquire that asset, as opposed to, you know, when the topic comes up. Again, back to being reactionary to the situation. And when it comes to anything that we're discussing, business building, estate planning, you cannot be reactionary to these situations, because you find yourself not just stressed, but you might be overpaying what you could have done, in the primary point of the situation. So that's my comments behind that. I'll give it to Andrew.
For me, mainly the conversations are brought up when people are looking for insurance. And when we start peeling back the onion level of, okay, what is your family makeup? What do you have? And I start expressing to them, okay, you have your will, but then you've also named a beneficiary on your life insurance policy. Now, do you know that in your will, you've stated you wanted this insurance policy to pay for, or to go to XYZ, you wanted to go to this person and help this grandchild, but you naming that beneficiary on your life insurance policy negates that. So there's a lot of misconceptions in regards to people will do things with good intentions, but not fully educate themselves on how something actually flows when you pass away with a particular life insurance or asset. So what's happening is that people either A, get their eyes wide open when they say, I did not know that I had to pay taxes when I die. I did not know. I did not know. I did not know. And then they have to go back and unravel certain things. So that's why I said the best time to start looking at estate planning is before you even get into the situation, like Stefan said, where you have to now react. But doing something is better than doing nothing, because whoever you're, and also knowing who you're going to be naming as your personal representative, who's going to be that person in charge of handling your affairs, because that person not only has to be tempered, it has to surround themselves with the right professionals, i.e. an accountant, possibly a lawyer, to know the rules and regulations on how to deal with certain things, unless you have a simple estate, unless you're just, a single parent and you didn't really have much, and it's just, one or two children, and like Ray said, you don't have much assets and have to worry about. But once you start realizing that you have things that you want done with your money, it's very, very important to start looking at and having an itemizing those things.
I'm going to throw a caveat in the equation now. For the audience members, I've been in the mortgage and real estate space since 1999. So I've got a love for real estate and things real estate. And I understand that real estate is one of the fastest ways to make money. I'm also a historian of my discipline. So I'll go back and give you data on interest rates and property values across North American equity for the last 25, 30, 40 years. In 2013, you could have bought a house in Brampton, $239,000, right? 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom townhouse, 1,100 square feet, $239,000. That's 10 years, 11 years ago. Today, that property is worth about $800,000, right? So by default, we've got a lot of people, Black and Korean people in the Greater Toronto area, who are sitting on tremendous assets, providing that they never refinance that real estate in the day they bought. So they bought a property in, let's say they bought a detached home, they bought it for around $300,000 or $400,000. It's worth about $1.5 million today. If they manage their mortgage properly, that was 10 years ago, with the appreciation in assets, they're probably sitting on a $1.25 million piece of real estate. It's a common conversation that Black people's net worths have been declining significantly over the last 40, 50 years, all across North America. And, many people point that the cause of this decline in our net worth and all that kind of stuff, it's lack of financial IQ, systemic racism, and all the other stuff. But how do you have people who are buying an asset that's appreciated at a tremendous rate over a decade or two, and then not having an estate to go to the next generation? How do we start the conversation, right? I mean, this platform is one of those conversations. Morning money conversation is a place where we want to have those real life conversations about money and wealth transfer. How do we educate our clients? I'm referring to all three of us, and this is probably our closing comment, because we're 12 minutes over. How do we educate people we meet, have them understand that home you buy for your family can become the greatest contributor to your estate and generate for you millions of dollars of assets going forward? How do we get that into people's psyche where it becomes what everybody wants to do? So the conversation about racism and all the other stuff tends to go into the background, because yes, there is racism. Yes, there are systems in place that don't help us all the time. But having money and assets, I'm of the opinion, will change your position in the whole game of life in this part of the world.
Give it to Andrew.
Anybody want to touch that one?
Yeah, no, that was a mouthful. That was a
Yeah.
mouthful, and I look back at conversations that I had with clients, and I look back at some of the meaningful conversations where I could see the light go off of how you can convince somebody that something is now important to look, or that you need to make this adjustment if you say this is an importance to you, right? So for convincing somebody, I don't know if you can convince somebody until they're ready. And I think it's really beginning with meeting that individual where they're at. Where are they right now, and what's the most important thing to them? And then trying to find some way to relate that the importance of what they do now has a grave effect on what happens in the future. The decisions that they make now will have an effect on what they do. So I always put it this way: is like, you want to make decisions that for yourself that the future you will say thank you for. And if you can look past, if you could say, you know what, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I can look back and say, you know what, I'm glad I made that decision then it's probably worth looking at and digging into it deeper on finding more information about that. So whether it be to make more money, whether it be to say, you know what, I really want this thing to be there for my child, well, then it's worth digging into. But I really think that you have to meet them where they're at and what's more important, because not everybody's thinking that far ahead, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
30 seconds, Steph. You got
all
30
right,
seconds.
thanks. I'll crunch in 30 seconds. I think, yes, meeting them in the middle is somewhere you have to at times. But I think in my experience with the clients that I come across, you got to look at owning real estate beyond the walls that you live and habit in. It's also a money-making asset. As like a car, it comes with a manual. You have to maintain it, right? So if you kind of view it as the asset as a manual where you have to do estate planning, you have to fix the roof. There's things you have to do, right? If you look at it that way, it may create some type of not as in a sense urgency to ensure that this property is sound, because on the flip side, there's individuals that are not doing anything, their home is decaying, right? So you also have to make sure if you want to pass this asset down, it has to be,
Pride of ownership.
yeah, pride of ownership, right? So you also have to be mindful of that as well, because I do come across that as well. If you're planning to transfer this to your grandkids, but your roof's falling apart or you have water damage in the basement, you have to attend to those things and you have to do something about it, because it just gets worse. So that's my 30 seconds right there.
I think I'm going to put it before I introduce the audience to Jackman again. I think for many of us, we have, when it comes to money and assets that generate wealth, I think many Black and Caribbean people, and it probably goes back to our history, that is, coming here 400 years ago, or through colonialism and all the other stuff in parts of the English-speaking Commonwealth. We have a very interesting emotional dynamic with money, which I think doesn't allow us to use it as a tool. We treat money the same way we treat our children, with the same level of emotion. We don't understand it. Okay, this is a tool that I can use to change my life and my family's life. And with that, once I understand that, I need to take certain risks. I mean, you're not going to risk your child's life on a money-making venture, but you can deal with money the same way you see your child or your mother, your parents, or your siblings. And I think once we understand that, I think we will have a different perspective on creating the wealth blueprint, dealing with the budget. I start with budgeting. That's the first place it starts with budgeting. So how do we budget? How do we save money? How do we protect it? Do we find a great job? Do we invest in a business? And then the final part is the estate planning. And those aren't emotional conversations. They're very logical, clear thinking conversations. Once you bring the emotion into it, or excessive emotion, I think you're gonna run into problems. So for the audience, anybody got any final questions or comments, you can always raise your hand, throw it in the chat. We want to thank you for spending your time with us every Wednesday morning. We've got all convos up on our website, the Macmillan Group. You can go listen to those conversations, or if you want a copy of any of the links, just send a message to Andrew or Stefan and they can share it with you. Their contact information is up on the stage. Andrew Stewart is a chartered life underwriter. He's been in the industry for more than 15 years. He's a great friend of mine. His website is dfinsuranceSolutions.com. You can go to his site, see what he does. He's got a very interesting Instagram feed, man. This guy is always out there doing fun stuff with his family. Stefan, who's my eldest son, is a mortgage agent. He has spent his entire life in my office. He got licensed I can't remember. I'm getting old, so the dates sometimes fail me. But I know he's been doing this probably since 2017, 16, 15. I can't remember. Our site is macmillangroupinc.com. You can message us direct from the website. We love the interaction. We'd love to basically share our experience with you. I myself, I'm looking at my next opportunity. I'm trying to figure out my next move. I'm on doing some exciting things. If you want to know what I'm doing, you can feel free to reach me through the website also. And you can ask me any question. I'm not shy about sharing what I do with the audience. I think, I've had some great mentors in my lifetime. And I would love to mentor anybody who is trying to do anything when it comes to business or real estate or investing anywhere in Canada, the US, or the Caribbean. My background is extensive in terms of, business management and mortgage and real estate and financing. And I worked in banking and all those wonderful things. So sometimes I don't even know my stuff. I know this might ask me a question, and that's not, I'm not trying to pump my chest here. But again, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Ricky, thanks for spending the last hour with us. Ricky's down in, where are you, Ricky? Down in DC, I think. We got a lot of people, folks in this call from different parts of the world. Next time we do our call, we got to ask to drop their location, the chat, so we know where they are. We can hit them up, and ask them what life is like where they are. And that's Ricky's in DC. I know there's some folks on the call from Guyana, folks here from Jacksonville, probably from New York, Toronto. But thank you very much, everybody. Do have a safe day. We look forward to seeing you exactly 1 month from now on the next morning money conversation with Stef and Drew, where we may have real life money conversations. Thanks a lot and stay safe.
All right, thanks everyone. Take care.
All right, take care. Thank you for everybody.